Hey Corn, what autistic characters do you relate most to? Okay, here's the thing. I'm not sure I've ever felt fully represented by autistic characters in major media. And that's not to say I don't think there's good examples out there, because there absolutely is, but there's simply not enough to reflect the diversity of the autism spectrum, and these conversations are largely dominated by low support need folks like myself. It's made me not want to talk about this because there's so many voices saying the same things over and over without context, but I'm going to give my best shot at it. I think there's a big problem in autistic representation, but I don't necessarily think it's what everyone else is saying. But I don't see low support needs autism represented. This is something I hear quite often, and I really don't understand why people think low supports needs autism is underrepresented when nearly every major representation has centered them in the last decade. Quinny from Heartbreak High, Dr. Sean Murphy from The Good Doctor, Edward from Not Dead Yet, Sam from Atypical, Drea and Matilda from Everything's Gonna Be Okay, Jack and Violet from As We See It, Woo Young Woo from Attorney Woo, Christian from The Accountant, Sheldon from Young Sheldon and The Big Bang Theory, Sarah from Young Royals, Max from Parenthood. And this is not even remotely a comprehensive list, but these are all things I have personally seen as someone who watches a lot of movies and TV and can confirm what usually people think of when you say autism rap. They are all arguably low to moderate support need autistic folks, but for some reason, low support need autistic folks will keep telling you that they're nothing like the childish representations of autism in media. Which, okay, we need to tackle internalized ableism there and why you feel the need to put down high support folks to make your case. It gives me the same energy as, but I'm an autistic person who works and plays baseball and writes poems. You're missing the point. You are not assigned worth by how many things you can do, and this plays into a dangerous ableist slope of disabled people only being worthy of agency, respect, and rights if they meet some capitalistic standard instead of just being inherent as humans. Radical, right? But it's also just not true. I get it. We all hate Rain Man and What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and I feel that those two movies have had a lot of influence on why autistic people hate older rep, but things have changed. Honestly, when I tried to find representation for higher support autistic folks in major media in the last decade, I couldn't. And that's not to say it doesn't exist because I can't browse the entirety of the internet, but it's safe to say that it's not the majority of representation. That's for sure. I will also say, a lot of you have told me that you resonate more with autistic characters in animated shows like Twyla from Monster High, characters from Gravity Falls, and much more. And while I haven't watched these shows personally, so I don't have a strong opinion, it does seem like there's a legitimate theme of people finding these representations much better, which begs the question, why? Is autism easier to draw? I have no idea, but I think the issue is that we're just unsatisfied by the representation we do have, and that's okay to say. I actually liked a few shows on that list, but does that mean they're good rep for everyone? No. I also really hated a few shows on that list. Why? Common issues with autistic rep in media. The savant stereotype. This is probably the biggest one that I personally loathe. Oh, they aren't capable of love or making conversation, but they can do long division in their head, are piano prodigy, and can save the world with their mind? And let me be clear that savant syndrome is absolutely a thing, but it's not nearly as common of occurrence as you think it would be. In Rimland's infamous 1978 survey of 5,400 children, a 10% incident of savant syndrome was found, and this has largely become the default stat. But why? That sample size is way too small to hold merit today. Hermelin in 2001 estimated that figure to be as low as 1 or 2 in 200, which is around 0.005 or 0.01%. On the other hand, instances of intellectual disabilities co-occurring in autism was historically believed to be around 70%, and now we believe that number to be closer to 30%. But for some reason, folks don't talk about this. And that's ableism. We're okay with the association of being thought of as superheroes or incredibly smart, but the thought of being intellectually disabled, not as cool apparently. And fundamentally, it's not savant syndrome that is the problem, it's media telling us that we're only interesting or useful when we have it by only showing it. Autistic people who struggle and don't do amazing things every day are worthy of stories too. The perpetual burden stereotype. I think this is a nuanced one for sure, but it's a narrative that autistic people are perpetually a burden on their friends and family. This type of perspective almost only focuses on the caretaker and how autism ruins their life instead of the actually autistic person, how it infects their day-to-day. There's nuance here because yes, being an autistic caretaker can be hard, but this singular viewpoint really only frames autistic people as burdens instead of just disabled people who need accommodations and are worthy of respect regardless of their ability to contribute. It's not that the narrative is always bad, but it dominates the bulk of higher support needs autistic rep, enforcing that the only way for them to show their stories is through someone else struggling to care for them. They're not disabled, they're differently abled. I think, just like the savant stereotype, positive euphemisms like this only seek to look at autism for its benefits, which fundamentally ends up invalidating all of our hardships because we're disabled. But disability is not a bad word. It's not morally good or bad to be disabled, it's just not being able to do something. We all have strengths and weaknesses as humans, but it does very little to remove the societal barriers or normalize accommodations if we're always posing disability as just a unique advantage. Allistic actors. I know this is a controversial one, and no doubt has a lot of gray area, which is something unironically I struggle with as an autistic person. Should autistic actors be able to cosplay autism? Is it just acting, or is it exploiting a community you don't belong to? Is it only okay if the representation is good? Ultimately, that's something you have to decide for yourself. But for me, I know that many autistic actors are out of work and not hired because of their disability, and in the one role they would be especially qualified for, they're often overlooked, and that sucks. It makes me feel even weirder knowing that non-disabled folks make millions, even billions, off communities they don't belong to, for the very same traits that people get harassed and killed for, ones that they can use for work and take off when they get home. I hear a lot of people say that acting in sets aren't friendly for autistic people either, but okay, they probably should accommodate the people that they're portraying for money, no? But we know that representation doesn't happen overnight. It takes decades, and there's tons of steps in between, like straight people playing gay people is a big step before gay people playing actually gay people in bad roles, before gay people playing gay people in good roles. I get it. But I do think it becomes increasingly clear when we see actors like Leonardo DiCaprio playing What's Eating Gilbert Grape that there is a line that we're comfortable with when it comes to non-disabled people cosplaying disability. Autistics are incapable of love or sex, and I say this as an asexual autistic person that these stereotypes are really harmful, because rarely do these perspectives come from wanting to show an authentically asexual or aromantic character, but to infantilize us, to say that we can't comprehend sexuality or romantic relationships because of our autism. It makes unfair and ableist assumptions about us based on our disabilities and that we aren't capable adults, because we are. But yes, dating as an autistic person is hard. Well, that's why autistic coded characters are usually written better. We love Abed, the Belcher kids, and Shirley. Okay, I totally get this because I am always calling autistic coded characters out in movies and TV, but generally I am asking, how will any moderate or high support needs autistic person ever feel represented by an autistic coded character? I know this fits the bill for so many low support need autistic people, but high support autistic people deserve to see AAC represented, those with caretakers, those who can't work, those with co-occurring disabilities. And that's never going to be an autistic coded character. And honestly, we all deserve better too. Because yes, relating to a character is one part of representation, but the other part is how that character actually represents your community, especially to outsiders. What is that representation if no one else knows they're autistic? Without these labels, these characters aren't giving us any meaningful representation outside of a personal context. We deserve to have our disabilities named and attributed, and I know that often these characters are accidents and the result of undiagnosed writers making these characters, but I'm not willing to settle for them as my ideal representation, and I don't think you should either. But I relate to robot and alien characters. Murderbot, Spock, Harry Vanderspiegel, the Transformers. Me too. But I think similar to autistic coded human characters, we deserve better. I think there is a genuine, overarching issue with only being able to relate to non-human characters, not for us, but what that communicates to other viewers, that traits like ours are non-human instead of just being everyday disabled traits. I don't think that inherently means any of those representations are problematic, but it does make me think. When we primarily associate issues communicating, reading body language, and fitting in as non-human ones, what does that say about us? And I know that some of these traits just make sense for alien and robot creatures. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I don't want the predominant rep for these traits to be only associated with non-human creatures, or at least not all of them. Cause that's what it feels like sometimes. But I did start watching Murderbot and Resident Alien this past month and thought to myself, is this play about us? It is. Did you watch Love on the Spectrum? This has got to be one of the most asked questions I've got this year. I did watch it. I've watched every season as it came out. Did I like it? That's another question. Honestly, I don't want to reiterate probably the thousands of thought pieces already made on this, so I'm just going to give my high-level thoughts so I don't have to do them again. Like many people, I dislike the overall tone of this series. Yes, the music is very much cute animal documentary vibes instead of an adult dating show, and I do feel like it's edited to make things look more awkward or worse than it is. Particularly in the most recent season, they would blatantly show scenes that cast members asked them to cut out. They would pose questions that were really misleading to confuse them. There was too many makeout scenes, and yes, I do have to mention the up-close foot shots because yes, I stim with my feet, but I do not want that on camera. I saw a lot of low support folks say they'd like to see more of themselves on the show, but I actually felt oppositely. I wanted to see more high support need folks. I'd love to see those who are using AAC or caretakers with them full time, as I definitely think that makes dating more challenging. I definitely love to see a little bit more diversity, but the queer couples were great, and overall, I think the issue is just the viewers and fan base. The amount of infantilizing of cast members on social media is actually so terrifying. Like using Tanner's voice to match with your cute pets as a social media trend? Oh, he's so pure? No, that's so weird. Did you know that person's family is Trump supporters? Yeah. Did you see their house? Putting any public figure on a pedestal can be problematic, but with disabled folks, there's always comes this sense of infantilization first, like, oh, they're so innocent, they can do no wrong, they're so cute. These are adults dating and engaging in adult relationships. Treat them as such. This show isn't inherently bad at all, and this is a big step for autism representation, but yeah, the attention and fan base kinda ruined this for me. What about Attorney Woo? If you've been following me for a while, you know that I have a love-hate relationship with extraordinary Attorney Woo. Yes, I'm South Korean too, so this is kind of an edible question, but I'll be honest, that children mass commenting Attorney Woo in all my videos for months did put me off of it. And alas, that is not a reflection of the show, but y'all need to knock that shit off, because calling a random Korean autistic person by the only other Korean autistic person you know is very much problematic. That being said, if you've gotten this far in this video, you'll probably guess my thoughts on the show. Yes, it's such a big deal to see autistic rep in South Korea, especially when all we had was Moon Sang-tae from It's Okay to Not Be Okay. This is no doubt a very big step. I love seeing a healthy love interest, good friendships, that's a big one. Some things I didn't like as much. I did get uncomfortable seeing a realistic actor at times play disability in a way that didn't always feel genuine. And yes, K-dramas kind of have these over-exaggerated movements and dialogue which just didn't really lend well to portraying disability. The savant stereotype is expectantly not my favorite, and I feel like they lean just a little bit too much into how hard her dad had it raising her. That being said, I don't think it's a bad show at all. I'm pretty neutral about these things because I can acknowledge that there's still work to do while it's still a big step, which kind of leads me to my next thoughts. What is the solution then? More content and more time. The thing is that most new autistic representation isn't even inherently bad. It's just not representative of everyone, especially high support and racialized folks. But no single piece of media will ever be representative of the full autism spectrum, especially when we consider diversity in race, sexuality, lifestyle, and much more. That's too much to ask for in a single piece of media, and I don't expect that either. We just need more of everything so we can have mediocre content too without it being a big deal. What resonates with you may not resonate with me and vice versa, and that's okay. However, we do need to have a sense of awareness for what is already out there, because having low support autistic white people tell me every 5 minutes that they need more representation like them is really frustrating. Or telling me that a certain autistic character is perfect rep for all of us when they're yet again another white low supports autistic character, but this time they're a woman. Maybe for you, sure, and that's super cool. That is a step in the right direction. I don't feel represented by that role, and that's valid too. That's why we just need more autistic characters in general so we can all start relating to characters. That would benefit all of us too. But yes, we can acknowledge how far we've come in representation while still advocating for better representation in the future too. The thing is, we just need more stories, so that one big piece of autistic media rep we get every year isn't the only thing that defines us. Autistic people deserve all kinds of stories, ones that don't just revolve around our disability, which can be good too, but rom-coms, adventurous tales, dramas, musicals, and yes, even horror films. But I also think there's a vital perspective missing from this conversation, and it's that autism has one of the higher representations of neurodivergency, even of all disability comparatively. What about other disabled rep? I'm going to be frank with you all that compared to other disabilities, we actually get a lot of rep. And I don't say that to mean that you should just be happy with what you have and get over it, but to mean that our advocacy can be larger. When was the last time you saw a representation of schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder that wasn't in a horror movie or a crime thriller? Very rare. When have you seen meaningful ADHD rep that isn't just a quippy one-liner about someone being late all the time? Have you seen or heard dyspraxia mentioned? I haven't. What about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders? I do see some PTSD and Down syndrome rep, but I could go on, and that's not even diving into the full spectrum of disability. I mean this so respectfully when I tell other autistic people that despite what popular neurodivergent influencers tell you, autism and ADHD are not the only folks who are neurodivergent, and we do have a tendency to center ourselves. And there's a reason why we have so much content and they don't. And that comes back to ableism and stigmatizing labels and conditions that we don't understand as much or are perceived as less palatable to audiences. So don't let it be lost, this issue does not exist in a silo, and I think it's a disservice to all of us to not include other disabled folks in your advocacy for more representation on screen. It's a disservice to not include racial diversity, rep for queer and trans folks specifically, and folks who belong to multiple communities like me. The complicated character problem. A pattern I see often in media is staying away from characters that are too complicated, or those who simply hold multiple marginalized identities. And it's a real thing. TV and movie producers are always trying to create characters that are above all relatable, because that brings in money, which is why they only focus on one identity aspect at a time, to bring that subset of people in, but keep it general enough that anyone can relate. But what they mean by this is white people. But they think if it gets too complicated, that people won't relate to an identity if it's too specific, but that's a logical fallacy. The issue is, we're always assuming that white, straight, and cis people are the default, And they're not. They often treat these as separate identities with no overlap to make them more palatable. We get Asian characters, we get queer characters, we get disabled characters, all existing separately. But rarely do we get a combination of all these things in one person in media, despite many marginalized folks living in these intersections. It also, in my opinion, makes far more interesting and complex stories when we explore how these identities compound and affect our experiences. Who would have known that intersectionality would also be good in entertainment? A lot of us. And we've been shown time and time again that media in these intersections actually does really well, but it's still a rarity in most major film studios. So in summary, we do need more autistic rep in general, but especially for higher support autistic folks. We also need more disability rep in general because autism is just one of many disabilities we need to see on screen more. And we want to see more complex stories exploring the intersections of race, disability, and sexuality because humans are complex. We can acknowledge we've gone such a long way in representation in the last few decades and still recognize that there's room for improvement because, yes, there's nearly endless possibilities to see our identities on screen, and you deserve to feel represented in the same way others have for years. Bye, friends. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and follow me on all my platforms for semi-daily content.